God has specially given you your set of conditions, background, experiences, and even your current and all future environment or circumstances by His design. This includes the good parts and the more trying areas of life. All these are to call us to trust Him while things around us may change, and also to bring out His message in our own roles and fields. So what unique role or situation is God putting you in today? Is this role something you are willing to take up and a route you are willing to go through? Or do you sometimes wrestle with your own preferences over where the Lord has led you to? Do you put your trust in Him as you examine where you are, what you do, and what God is calling you to do for Him? Maybe you're in a job that is not of your first choice of interest. Perhaps you're stressed out in a role you feel someone else can do better. Or the constant inner comparison you do with people around you is making you feel so inadequate and dreadful. But before we spiral down into more unhappiness and justification of how things can be better, let us consider God's faithfulness and long-standing track record of bringing people into something bigger than themselves, yet letting them see God's provision and grace pulling them through for greater fulfillments through them. Now, we may be familiar with Prophet Elijah, famous for having the showdown with 400 false prophets of King Ahab at Mount Carmel. He was a bold and passionate prophet who has displayed many great testimonies and deeds on behalf of the Lord. He anointed kings, turned thousands of people from idolatry, spoke up against Ahab and Jezebel, and many more. You would think that the next person who is taking over the job from Elijah might probably have a big hat to fill, but we have much to learn today from the successor of Prophet Elijah. As Elijah's journey will come to an end one day, God told Elijah to find his successor so that his work would continue on. So, Elijah went to find Elisha as his comrade and apprentice. Now, the thing about Elisha is that he's a hard worker and had a great flock of oxen as well. But when Elijah called him to follow him by throwing his cloak over Elisha, he knew what it meant. In 1 Kings 19 verse 20 to 21, it says, Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. "Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye," he said, "and then I will come back to you." "Go back," Elijah replied. "What have I done to you?" So Elisha left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to cook the meat and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah and became his servant. Elisha's response showed that he held nothing back in being fully committed to the Lord's calling for him through Elijah. This is where his life was changed forever. God had great plans in store for Elisha as he followed Elijah. Now, it is one thing to know that we should submit our lives to God, but another to really live out that one-hearted commitment. Of course, we are not asked to burn down our possessions and leave our family like Elisha had, but it is the heart's inclination and attitudes we have inside us that makes it hard for us to live out the life we are called into. One thing we can learn about Elisha is that when he put everything down to follow God's calling, knowing the value of this calling, the unique cloak that was thrown onto him, he experienced how God enables him throughout the journey. How did God enable Elisha? Firstly, he had a great spiritual role model to walk alongside him as he starts stepping into his calling. He had the guidance of a God-driven prophet, learning about his truth, seeing how it is like to proclaim this truth to others, and to live a life set apart for the Lord. He had a strong spiritual point of reference. Similarly, when God calls us into our fields, He also guides and prepares us for it. How? By the counsel of His Word, be it on the pulpit or our own Bible reading, the guidance of God-loving spiritual leaders amidst us, the testimonies of our brethren around us, and any other means that drive us back to meet God and build up our faith. Then, God also allows some tests to examine Elisha's faith and readiness to take up the calling. A few years has passed, and it was almost time for Elijah to rest from his labors. But all the while, Elisha followed Elijah through and through. As said in 2 Kings 1 verse 2, Elisha said to Elijah, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you." Elisha's unshaken commitment to the God of Elijah was shown. Then, as they go through each city, a company of prophets asked Elisha about Elijah's impending departure, to which Elisha did not respond by his own accord, but consistently told them to keep the news quiet. Elisha was not fazed by what the other prophets said, nor did he overthink or worry about his mentor leaving him soon. He trusted in God and His timing of when things will happen. And when Elijah asked Elisha what he would like to have, instead of asking for other things, Elisha asked for a double portion of the spirit that Elijah had. This was not Elisha being greedy, but that he recognized the spirit that was at work in Elijah. Back then, the firstborn son will always get double the portion of inheritance from their father, and here Elisha was asking to be considered as Elijah's firstborn son and to take over his leadership role as a prophet for Israel. Again, it shows Elisha's clear-headed understanding and commitment to his calling. And indeed, after Elijah is carried away into heaven, Elisha received double the spirit of Elijah and carried on God's work. Also, as God called Elisha into his ministry, he enables Elisha along the way by giving him just the right doses of provisions needed for that moment. Firstly, God established Elisha as the newly God-appointed prophet by letting him part the Jordan River before the prophets, letting them know that God's servant has changed, but his work will still go on. Then, Elisha healed the waters of a tainted spring in Jericho by purifying it with just a dash of salt. This is to show God's restoration and redemption for those corrupted by sin like the polluted spring. God also gave Elisha opportunities to speak for him before human kings and to influence his people in the right direction. So when God mobilizes his people to their calling, he also provides sufficiently. So our confidence and hope of where we are called to be does not rest in ourselves or the environment we face, but always on confirming God's sovereign plan and sufficient grace on those of us who are in Christ. So in which part of your life is it exposing to you your need for God? How quickly do we turn to Him? Do you seek for ways that God is enabling you in your roles? Do you trust in God's faithful provision as He calls you into different seasons of life? May we put in our hearts the example of Prophet Elisha today, a life fully committed to God's calling and one that experiences His enabling power and grace. God bless.